Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Ruvain speaking from Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 14th day of the month of Av, Menachem Av, the Comforting Father, 5780. It's the 4th of August, 2020. This coming Shabbat, we are reading Parashat Ekev from Deuteronomy 7, chapter 7, verse 12 through chapter 11, verse 25. Tonight is b'av, the 15th day of the month of Av, a very special, unique, somewhat mysterious, and growing and changing and developing holiday, which we'll talk about in a minute. B'av comes 7 days following Tisha B'av, the 9th of Av. Of course, we all know about the 9th of Av. I'd like to just talk about the 9th of Av for a few minutes before we move on to B'av and to Parashat Ekev, and to whatever else we decide to talk about in this week's show, which I'm reminding you is now a 35-minute format. Less time to suffer through Yitzchak, and more time to focus on what's important. Last week, myself, I went up to the Temple Mount with about 1,000 other Jews throughout the day. Throughout the day means from the hours of 7:30 in the morning to 11 in the morning, and again from 1:30 to 2:30. Those are the hours that the Temple Mount is open to Jews. And again, it's always an amazing experience to go on a Temple Mount any time of the year. To go up on Tisha B'av is a life-changing experience in that it completely, by force of the reality that you're seeing, it changes your perspective about Tisha B'av and about everything. And in the morning, Tisha B'av, first thing in the morning, I pray. I go up to the Temple Mount, and I come down, and as many of you may know, I went up with my camera, my phone camera, and videoed the entire trip around the mount that I participated in. It was about 25 minutes, and when I got back home, I actually recorded a narration, an explanation of where we were, what we were seeing, what was going on, etc., and I uploaded it to YouTube, and it has, as of today, over 27,000 views, and it was put up just less than a week ago. So obviously there's tremendous interest. I'm so appreciative of everybody who's watched, and some terrific feedback. I'm so happy to be able to share the experience as best as it can be shared via a video, and of course also to share some of the knowledge and the information and insights into what we're seeing when we're on the Temple Mount. But anyway, I get back home and I'm working on that, and I'm basically working the entire day because if you're working at the Temple Institute, Tisha B'av is a busy day. So the fast is almost like a side issue. You're not thinking about the fast. You're not thinking about when's it going to be over. You're working. And that basically, everybody who works at the Temple Institute is very busy on the 9th of Av. But what I wanted to say is in the afternoon, mincha tefillah, mincha prayer, and unique to Tisha B'av, in the morning, we don't put on our tefillin, talit. Not every, there are certain communities that don't follow this custom, but it's a very widespread custom that we don't in the morning as an expression, again, of mourning. And so we do that in the afternoon at mincha time. And in the afternoon prayer, we also add in the Shmona Esrei, in the Amidah, the 18 prayers, 18 benedictions that we say while standing in the afternoon. In the specific prayer that discusses Jerusalem, we insert a special prayer for Tisha B'av. And it goes like this in Hebrew: Nachem Hashem et Elokeinu et avelei Tzion et avelei Yerushalayim ve'et ha'ir ha'avela v'achareva v'habazuya v'shomema v'havela מבלי בניה והחרבה ממעונותיה והבזויה והמכבודה והשוממה מעין יושב הוא יושבת בראשה חפוי כאישה עקרה שלא ילדה ובעלוה לגיונות וירושוע וירשוע עובדי פסילים ויטילו את עמך ישראל לחרב והרגו בזדון חסידי עליון, and so on and so forth. And basically what it's saying is, please God comfort the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, and of the city that is in mourning and that is destroyed and that is empty and that has been ravaged and that is a wasteland, and it's basically it's like it says here, it's like a barren woman who has no children. It's alone, and like very many people, and I recorded Abba Horowitz today for his next teaching, which will be uploaded and ready tomorrow and Wednesday. But he also expressed the same thing. This prayer is so it's so not relevant to Jerusalem today, because Jerusalem is, thank God, a city that's just full of life, full of Torah, full of people, of men, women, children. It's just a beautiful city, lively and brimming with life and activity. So this description no longer fits. It does fit the Temple Mount, because God's house is the one thing in Jerusalem that is still shomema, that is still a wasteland, that is still barren. But there's one line in here, and that, it says like a woman who has no children. And I'm thinking, because I was up in the Temple Mount, you know what? God's children were with him today in this horribly sad day. God wasn't alone. His children were with him. His children went up to the Temple Mount, up to where God's house is, up to where the Holy Temple is meant to be. And we were with him. And so this prayer, to tell you the truth, I had to reword it in a way that fit my reality, because I can't make a prayer that to me is off, is not correct, and then close it with a make it into a blessing and close it with an amen. It has to be truthful. But the fact of the matter is that, again, like I said, for many people in Israel today, and should be around the world, this prayer needs a certain tweak, because Jerusalem itself is not barren anymore. We're not mourning Jerusalem. We are still mourning the fact that there is no temple, the fact that the Temple Mount is bzuya, that it's been desecrated, that it's desecrated on a daily basis by the lack of respect it gets from the Muslims who profess it to be their third holiest place on earth, but don't treat it as such, and from the Jews and from the Israeli government that at best treat it as a burden, or as a hot spot, as a place of potential violence and World War III, instead of as being as the place where God says to the prophet Haggai, in this place I will establish peace. That's what the Temple Mount is about. So anyway, not only could I not relate to the description of Jerusalem being a wasteland, but I couldn't relate to the description of God being alone, because he wasn't alone, because his children were there. And my trip on the Mount on Tisha B'av was very uneventful. The police kind of moved us along. There's certain places where we're usually able to stand and pray and even stand and sit. In another place where there's usually someone stands up and gives a teaching. They kept us moving. My feeling was basically I was the third group to go up, and they were nervous. They had to let a lot of people up, and the police get nervous at these things. And so I don't think that their rushing us was necessarily, out of a negative attitude toward us, but just they were nervous. They wanted to keep things moving along. However, I discovered later that day when I was looking at what other people posted that yes, many, many people did pray, and they prayed the Amidah, the 18 benedictions as a minyan, as a group of 10 or more Jews together. It's done silently, and then the Shaliach Tzibor, the leader of the prayer group, says the whole thing again out loud. That was done, and there were a number of people who were mishtachaveh, who were prostrated themselves. Of course, the police didn't like it, and there were a number of occasions where people said the Shema, and again, the police didn't like it, but the police weren't looking for trouble. They had their hands full, because there were a number of people up there, 1,000 people, and they weren't looking to arrest anybody or detain anybody. I think there was a case where they took some people down, but by and large, and I happen to know, and Abba Horowitz also said that he himself bowed down, and he himself said the Shema, and got his whole group saying the Shema, and the police didn't like it, but they didn't stop them. And why? Because there were so many people. And so the police can't do their petty, illegal restriction of Jewish rights on the Mount when there's that many people. So if 1,000 Jews went up every day, there'd be a very different reality on the Temple Mount. But as I started to say before, my reality has changed. My reality has changed. And I was just thinking that, when God creates man, this is a juk. A juk in Hebrew is it's basically a slang for a cockroach, but it's also slang for you got a little something in your head you can't get rid of, a thought, a juk we call it. So I have this juk. When God created man, and he said, it's not good for man to be alone. What does God know from being alone? What does God know from loneliness? I mean, God was one, but God was everywhere. And it occurred to me that after the destruction of the temple, when Jews aren't on the Temple Mount, God's alone. God misses his children. The most beautiful thing we can do, the greatest mitzvah that a Jew can do, is to relieve God of his loneliness. Go to the Temple Mount. Be there. You don't believe me? Try it. You think, of course, there's so many ways to be with God. Of course, God is everywhere, and there's so many ways that we connect. And every mitzvah is a connection. That's the meaning of the word mitzvah. Connection to God. And we can connect with God in every moment of our lives in thousands of different ways. But all I'm saying is, here is a unique way, an amazing way, and you can't possibly get what it's about until you've done it. And you can do it any day of the year, of course, that the police allow you up there. And certainly on Tisha B'av, it's a particularly unique experience to be with God, to be comforting God, right? To be comforting God in his house. Just like if someone is mourning, we go to their house to comfort them. We're comforting God in his house. What a mitzvah. What a blessing to be able to do it. A real blessing. So Tisha B'av is transitioning right now, and I think it's way overdue, but it's transitioning from a day of passive mourning and sitting low to the ground and weeping into a day of building and focusing on building and changing our attitude and changing the narrative and very rightfully changing our tefillah, our prayer. Okay? These prayers were a prayer that was written after the destruction is not meant to be a prayer for all times. And if we are already transitioning into the mindset for rebuilding, then that prayer also needs to be transitioned. That's my feeling. Tonight, Tu B'Av, the 15th day of the month of Av, is a very, very, very unique, very beautiful holiday. Is it a a Torah holiday that is? Is it one of the holidays from the 5 books of Moses? No, it's not mentioned in there at all. In fact, its origins are somewhat mysterious, and what we're actually celebrating, there's a number of things. We'll talk about that in a moment. It happens that it is the 7th day following Tisha B'av, meaning that in the context of Tisha B'av, it's part of a 7-day transition, right? It's basically the final unequivocal conclusion to Tisha B'av. Anybody who had any lingering feelings of elut, of mourning, of being down, it's over now, because this is a day to celebrate. But we all know that the prophet Zechariah, is that how you say it? Zechariah in Hebrew, Zechariah, that he said that the fasts of the 4th and the 5th and the 7th and the 10th will become holidays when the temple is rebuilt. Right? These are the 4 fasts that we fast throughout the year that are connected to the destruction of the temple. The fast of the 5th being the 5th month, and that being the fast of the Tisha B'av, and they'll all become holidays. So when Tisha B'av becomes a holiday, it will be the first day of a 7-day celebration that ends with the holiday of Tu B'Av. Does that sound familiar, this concept of a 7-day holiday? Well, it should, because of course we know that Sukkot is a 7-day holiday, and we know that Passover is a 7-day holiday, and that the first day and the last day are actual Yamim Tovim, in which we don't do avodah, we don't do work, we don't do melacha, I should say, we don't do work on those days. They are full-fledged celebrations, full-fledged holidays. The intermediate days are just that. In Hebrew, Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days between the 1st and the 7th. So the holiday of Tisha B'Av to Tu B'Av, which we will be celebrating when the temple is rebuilt, and which was celebrated during the time of the Second Temple. We know that. It's written that became a celebratory period. That's what it's going to be. That's the potential there, and that's for us to make that difference. That's a holiday that is completely dependent on our making it a holiday by rebuilding the Holy Temple. So if we want another holiday, if you want 7 days in the middle of summer to celebrate, as opposed to 7 days to as opposed to the 3 weeks of mourning which precede this, I think it's worth the effort, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's worth the effort, if for nothing else. And of course, there's every reason in the world to rebuild the Holy Temple. But I say this is one of them, and a very good one. So what's Tu B'Av all about? We're not really sure, but in the Mishnah and in the Talmud, there are reasons given for it. And one of the reasons is that on the 9th of Av, the restriction between intermarriage between the tribes during the time in the desert and the first generations that Israel was in the land and the tribal inheritances were being distributed, it was very important that the tribes married only into their own tribes to maintain the integrity of the tribes. Later on, that ban between intermarriage was lifted, and so a girl from the tribe of Yehuda could marry a boy from the tribe of Menashe, etc., etc. So that's part of the celebration. It's also mentioned that the tribe of Benjamin, if you recall the story, horrible story at the end of the book of Judges, there was a civil war basically between the tribe of Benjamin and the other tribes. And the tribe of Benjamin the men were practically wiped out. The tribe almost became extinct, God forbid. And in order to replenish the people, and in order to give the women, the daughters of that tribe, an opportunity to marry, at a certain point after this war had ended, they also were allowed to marry, intermarry with the other tribes. Also, it's known that the day of the 9th of Av was the last day for collecting wood for the offerings, wood for burning the offerings and the altar in the Holy Temple. And the reasoning given was that after that day, as the days start to get shorter again, we're past the summer equinox, and the days are getting shorter. And I should say I guess it's the spring equinox, the vernal equinox. The days are getting shorter, and a little bit more humidity. And so they say that, our sages say that any wood collected after this date, that it might not be properly dried. It could have worms in it, which would make it pasul, make it not fit for the fires on the altar. So this was the final day throughout the year that those woods were collected for the burning on the altar. Also, in the time of the kings, King Hoshea of the northern kingdom, removed the sentries on the roads leading to Jerusalem. At some point after the division of the northern kingdom from the kingdom of Judea, the kings of Israel banned their citizens from traveling to the temple in Jerusalem. They created an alternate temple. There was avodah zarah, there was idolatry, there was some bad stuff going on. And King Hoshea lifted that. He opened up the roads so that people could begin again to make the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. This happened on the 15th of the month of Av. We're also told that the Roman occupiers, now this at after the destruction of the second temple, and after the revolt, the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, in which it was finally put down brutally by the Romans, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and they were not allowed. The final battle was in the city of Beitar, which is just south of Jerusalem, and they were not allowed to bury the dead. So sometime after, I believe it was more than a year after the conclusion of that battle and the end of the merid, the end of the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, the people were allowed to bury the dead. And a miracle happened. They said that the bodies had not decomposed. They had been preserved so that they could be properly buried. And so that was also a reason for celebration. Also, they say that in ancient times it was the beginning of the grape harvest. Yom Kippur marked the end of the grape harvest. So this is also another very fascinating concept, aspect of the holiday of Tu B'Av. And another very famous aspect of the holiday is that, as I mentioned before, it was the day that this ban on intermarriage between the tribes was lifted. So a certain custom developed in that girls, women, it's mentioned in the Talmud that women in Jerusalem and women in Shiloh was where the tabernacle was, and I guess in the time of the tabernacle was still in Shiloh, the custom began there that women, young women, unmarried women, would go out into the vineyards and hold hands and dance, and they also would all wear white clothes to emphasize their purity and their virtue, and they would borrow clothes from their neighbors, so that we couldn't possibly judge a woman, a young girl, by what she was wearing. Was it fancy? Was it simple? Was it beautiful? Because it wasn't hers. It was her neighbor's. It was someone else's. So that the boys would come out to find a girl to marry, right? And so they would look at these girls. They could see if the girl was beautiful. They could see if the girl, they could see beauty, whether it was physical beauty or spiritual beauty or the beauty of virtue, but they couldn't have a materialistic judgment of who they were looking at because they couldn't tell what they were wearing. They're not going to pick someone, oh, her father looks like he must be rich. I'm going to go for her. So the boys would approach the girls and say, I don't know. How, today you'd say, may I have this dance? I don't know how they did it exactly then. But this was how they would do what we call shidduchim. This is how they would find their meant to be and marry. So they say it's described in the Talmud as the happiest day of the year, that b'av, and also the same custom was practiced on Yom Kippur. This custom of the girls dressing in white, borrowed clothes, and dancing in the fields in Jerusalem and other places, and the boys coming out to find a bride. And it's described in the Gemara and the Talmud as the happiest days of the year, b'av and Yom Kippur, which is such an amazing description. There's no caveat here. There's no but. They're the happiest days of the year. Now, we tend to think of Yom Kippur as a solemn day. Well, it is a solemn day, but the fact of the matter is it is a super happy day in any case because it's a day that God forgives our sins. It's the day that we go in, and if we're open and honest and true to ourselves and to God and to one another, then God cleans the slate and we can begin anew, which is a beautiful day, for meeting the person you're meant to spend the rest of your life with as well, if you think about it. But anyway, the idea that Yom Kippur is the happiest day of the year is, I think it astonishes a lot of people this year who see it as, such a serious day and, a difficult day, a day of fasting, and it is all those things, but it is a very, very happy day. And my experience is that by the end of Yom Kippur, you're in a high. You're in a spiritual high, and eating is almost an afterthought when the fast is over. But the concept that alongside this, that part of the custom that grew up alongside this back in the day of the Holy Temple was this custom of the girls dancing in the field and the boys finding their meant to be, and that this most important day of Yom Kippur had its parallel day in b'av, just goes to show what a powerful day b'av is, even if it's not so well defined where it came from, but it is also a day that has so much potential for us to shape and continue to define. And again, when the Holy Temple is rebuilt, it will be an amazing day. Now, today in Israel, it's sort of a day of love, and you can understand why. So it's Yom HaAhava, the day of love in Israel, which in the modern connotation, people kind of relate it to a Valentine's Day type thing or a Sadie Hawkins Day, if anybody is familiar with that expression, where you do something beautiful with your loved one, or you find a loved one, and that's a very beautiful concept, and it's become a little bit commercialized, but it's on the right track. And it is a day of love. And of course, it's a day of love which comes to supersede and to it's an antidote to the baseless hatred which our sages told us was the underlying reason that tore apart the Israelites and caused the destruction of the Holy Temple, the Second Temple, because the Israelites, the Jews, were just fighting amongst themselves with baseless hatred. And I have to say that very, very, very unfortunately, there is an aspect of that happening right here today in Israel. And as soon as I talk about it, if you haven't heard about it already, you're going to recognize this phenomenon, because I think we might have actually imported it from the United States, and that is there's a nightly protest now outside the Prime Minister's residence, which has become very loud and ugly and aggressive and just full of hateful messages. And it's, people protesting all different things. There's not a common theme to it except an Bibi, anti-Benjamin Netanyahu message. And the fact of the matter is, the guy, you might like him, you might not like him, he was just elected. They just formed a government. Let the wheels of democracy turn, as creaky as they might be. He is on trial. You think he's a criminal? Okay, you know what? He's on trial. If you have any trust in the system, that you wanted him to be on trial because you think he's guilty, so let the wheels of justice turn. They might turn too slowly for you, but this has become a horrible hate fest with all sorts of disgusting things going on. And some people go there to protest against the prime minister. Some people go to protest the fact that, they don't like the corona regulations. And some people are protesting because they're out of work because of corona, and they're frustrated about that, and they want more government aid. Very legitimate. And some people are protesting all different things. Some people are protesting, against violence against animals. It's very legitimate, but really, that's what this is about. Basically, it's a form of entertainment, because other forms of entertainment have been shut down. So people are going out every night, for this entertainment, which is the worst kind of entertainment, because it's really no purpose. If you want to protest something, protest something. If you want a different program, you want a different government, protest for a change, not against what you've got. Protest for, present something. That's my opinion. So unfortunately, we have this aspect of, and it's really an aspect of just this baseless hatred we call in Hebrew sinat chinam, which really has to stop. It's very, very destructive, deadly, and dangerous, this phenomenon. So I'm hoping that tonight's Tu B'av and a day of love, of ahava, will maybe inject some reality back into people, and start to talk about straightening out lowering the curve of the corona. I'd like to lower the curve very dramatically of this phenomenon of hatred. Okay, we've talked about Tisha B'av, we've talked about Tu B'av. Let's talk a little bit about, in the couple of minutes we have remaining, because I've really gone on about Parashat Ekev, which begins in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 12, and I'm just going to read the first verse in Hebrew. Be'ekev v'haya ekev tishama'un et hamishpatim eile ushmartem v'asitem otam v'shama. I'm just reading a very difficult text. V'shama Hashem Elokecha lecha et habrit et hesed asher nisba lavotecha. And it says in English, and it will be because you heed these ordinances and keep them and perform them, that Hashem your God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that He swore to your fathers. Again, I think we teach this every year, but it's important. The word v'haya ekev. Ekev is a kind of a word that's not translated. It's translated as because. It doesn't really mean because. It doesn't really have a meaning. Because you will heed these ordinances and these mitzvot, these commandments. And the word ekev actually literally means heel. So our sages have told us that we tend to categorize mitzvot. There were 613 commandments. Some we see as more important, some as less important. It's more important not to murder someone than it is to put on tzitzit. But basically what this is saying is, don't tread under your heel any commandment. Don't treat it with lightness. Every commandment is important for you. Every commandment is important for Hashem. Every commandment has its place. Every commandment has its purpose in building up who you are, making you the person you should be. So, v'haya ekev tishma'un, and if you follow and keep ekev diligently, don't put it under your heel, don't tread upon it lightly, respect it, respect what it can do for you, how it can change you, how it can make you a better person, and that in Hashem's eyes, all commandments are equal. Thank you so much for being with me, Temple Talk, and I wish everybody a beautiful Tu B'av, Yom Ahava, a day of love. Let's bring it on, people. Love. Temple Talk.